Get that filthy shack down, now!
Her blonde bob bouncing as she jabbed a manicured finger at my grandfather's cabin. A backhoe roared up the gravel, treads chewing through wildflowers my wife had planted 4 springs ago. Cheryl waved a clipboard like a battle flag. I parked my old Ford behind the chaos. Diesel smoke curled into the pines, sharp and bitter. Cheryl spun, lipstick smile cracking when she saw me.
Sir, this is HOA enforcement. Step back!
I just slipped my hand into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper, softer than my truck's leather seat. The original 1887 federal land patent for every acre under her heels. What would you do if a Karen tried to demolish your home? Tell me in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from tonight. My name is Wade Holloway, and Pine Hollow Valley has belonged to my family since 1887. My great-grandfather Silas walked these ridges with a Winchester and a survey chain. He carved a homestead out of timber too stubborn to fall and weather too proud to break. He paid the federal land patent in silver dollars, registered 4,200 acres at the Ravalli County Courthouse, and built a cabin under a copper pine that still stands today. 4 generations later, I came home to bury my wife, Eliza Holloway, colon cancer at 38. The chemo bought us 2 more summers in Maryland, but the 3rd summer never arrived. After the funeral, I sold our place in Frederick, packed up her gardening books and her grandmother's quilt, and drove west until my chest stopped aching. The trip took 11 days. I slept in highway motels with cigarette-stained curtains. I drank weak coffee at 24-hour diners in Bismarck, Billings, and Bozeman, and stared at folded maps like I was 25 again, planning a hunting trip with my father. By the time I crossed the Continental Divide at Lookout Pass, the weight in my chest had loosened just a little. The first night back in the valley, I slept on the cabin floor under a wool blanket that smelled like cedar and wood smoke. And for the first time since the funeral, I dreamed without crying. I'm a retired Army Corps surveyor. 22 years walking lines, reading deeds, settling boundary disputes from Anchorage to Atlanta. So when I came home, I knew exactly what I owned and exactly where the lines fell. I restored my great-grandfather's cabin board by board. I replanted Eliza's wildflower meadow. I drank coffee on the porch and listened to elk bugle in October. For the first time in 2 years, I started sleeping through the night. The trouble walked up my driveway last May. A silver Lexus, plates fresh from the dealer. Out stepped Cheryl Brennan, late 50s, polished blonde bob, a quilted vest with a tiny embroidered patch that read, Cedar Ridge Estates, President. The HOA, she presided over occupied 40 acres at the south mouth of my valley, a luxury subdivision my father had reluctantly sold off in 2003 to settle my mother's hospital bills. 26 homes, beige stucco, manicured lawns where bunch grass used to bend. "Hello there," Cheryl chirped like she owned the air. "I'm the new president of Cedar Ridge. I just had to come introduce myself. We've been seeing your little cabin from the back porches and, well, it's just a bit rustic for our standards." I sipped my coffee. "It's not in your HOA." She laughed, a sharp, glass-bright laugh. "Oh, sweetie, property values, view shed, curb appeal. The standards apply to everyone in our community." I set the mug down. "Cheryl, my property line is half a mile north of your gate. I'm not in your community." "Well," she tilted her head, smile tightening. "We'll see about that." She left a copy of the HOA covenants on my porch step, a yellow sticky note with 3 smiley faces, and a perfume cloud strong enough to scare off the chickadees. That night, the first email landed. Cheryl copy-pasted to 40 neighbors and a county commissioner, complaining about the eyesore visible from Lot 14. The next morning, a Cedar Ridge security car rolled past my driveway 6 times. The morning after that, a drone hummed over my meadow for 43 minutes, low enough that I could hear its motors over the creek. I called my old friend Jim Carrington, a contractor in Hamilton, who would help me re-roof the cabin. "Wade," he said over the phone, "I've heard about this woman. Cedar Ridge is paying her $70 grand a year to run that HOA, and she's making enemies faster than my mother-in-law at Thanksgiving. I should have hired a lawyer that week. I should have written a cease and desist. But I just buried my wife. My heart was still papery and slow, and I told myself she'd lose interest. People like Cheryl always burned out, I figured. Then I went inside, sat at Eliza's kitchen table, and stared at a copy of the 1887 land patent framed above the stove. The patent said the entire valley was mine. Cheryl Brennan was about to find out the hard way. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday. Thick envelope, embossed logo, Cedar Ridge Estates Architectural Review Board. Inside, a 6-page demand. Paint my cabin a neutral approved color within 30 days. Remove the metal roof. Relocate the chicken coop to reduce odor migration into HOA airspace. And pay a $400 annual exterior compliance fee. I read it twice. Then I laughed so hard the dog looked up. I drove down to the Cedar Ridge gate that afternoon. Cheryl was waiting on the clubhouse porch, 2 of her board members beside her. A thin man with golf-tan hands named Greg, her husband, and a sour-faced woman named Patricia. Cheryl beamed when she saw me. "Mr. Holloway, so glad you came." I dropped the demand letter on the porch table. "I'm not in your HOA. I never signed anything. I never bought property from your developer. You have no jurisdiction over me, my paint, my chickens, or my roof. Stay off my land." Cheryl's smile didn't move. "We have rules, sir. Community standards. The county recognizes our authority over the viewshed corridor." "That's a lie." "Excuse me. There is no viewshed corridor. There is no county recognition. You're making it up." Greg cleared his throat. "Now listen here." "No, you listen." I kept my voice level. 22 years in the Corps teaches you that quiet costs more than yelling. Send me one more letter, drone my property one more time, and I will see you in court. I walked back to my truck. Behind me, I heard Cheryl mutter, "We'll see who walks away from this." 2 days later, the drone came back. I shot photos. I logged the times. I filed an FAA complaint for unauthorized commercial drone flight under 50 feet. That's an actual federal violation, by the way, not a suggestion. The takeaway is simple. If a neighbor flies a drone over your home for surveillance, the FAA has a hotline, and they take it seriously. The FAA opened a case. Cedar Ridge got their first fine. Cheryl's response was elegant in its pettiness. She filed a noise complaint against me for industrial rooster activity. A deputy named Caleb Yates showed up at my door, hat in hand, looking embarrassed. He was maybe 26, a Ravalli County native, polite as a Sunday school teacher. "Mr. Holloway, sir, I'm real sorry to bother you. We got a complaint about your, roosters." "I have 2 hens, no roosters." He blinked. Then he looked past me at the coop, where 2 brown Wyandotte hens were pecking at oat scraps, neither one capable of crowing. "Yes, sir, I see 2 hens." He wrote that down, then looked up. "Mind if I tell you something off the record?" "Go ahead." "Mrs. Brennan calls dispatch 6, 7 times a week. About different folks. We're getting tired of it." He paused. "If you ever want to file a counter-complaint about harassment, I'd take it personally." I shook his hand. I made a mental note. Caleb Yates was a man worth knowing. Cheryl tried a new angle next. She approached my mailman with a printed flyer claiming my cabin harbored unsafe livestock and asked him to decline service for sanitation reasons. The mailman, a wiry guy named Pete who'd known my father, told her where she could mail that flyer. He brought a copy to my porch that evening, grinning. "Hey, Wade," he said, "she also tried to convince me your driveway was on HOA land." "It's not." "I know, I drive it every day." We laughed. I poured him coffee. The valley wind smelled like wet pine and cold creek water, and the meadowlarks were back from their winter grounds. That night, I sat on the porch with a fresh notebook and a sharp pencil. I wrote down every incident, every date, every witness. 22 years of surveying had taught me that paper trails beat shouting every single time. I labeled the notebook Brennan, Case File 1, and tucked it into the safe under the floorboards next to Eliza's wedding ring. Cheryl had no idea what kind of opponent she was about to wake up. She escalated by attacking Eliza's memorial. In the meadow behind the cabin, on the gentle slope where Eliza had spread her wildflowers, I had planted a small grove of aspen trees. 12 of them, one for each year we'd been married. A flat granite stone sat at the center, etched with her name and a single line. "She walked lightly here." I'd built it with my own hands the autumn after she died. It was my favorite place on earth. One bright June morning, I came home from a supply run in Hamilton and found Cheryl, Greg, and a hired landscape crew standing in my meadow. A chainsaw was running. 2 of my aspens lay across the grass, raw white wood weeping sap. I ran. "Stop, stop!" The chainsaw kept going. The operator looked up only when I grabbed his shoulder. He killed the saw, startled. Cheryl marched forward, waving another clipboard. These trees violate the viewshed setback. I have an HOA enforcement order. This is my private land. It's visible from Lot 9. I don't care if it's visible from the moon, Cheryl. You are trespassing. She didn't budge. Greg shifted nervously, but Cheryl wore that bright, dangerous smile women like her wear when they think a man can be steamrolled in front of witnesses. We have authority over visual encroachment within 500 feet of... You have authority over 40 acres of stucco houses and not 1 inch beyond them. I called the sheriff's office. I asked for Deputy Yates by name. He arrived in 14 minutes. I timed it. His face went stone flat when he saw the downed aspens. Ma'am, please step off Mr. Holloway's property. I'm executing an HOA enforcement. Ma'am, you are trespassing on private land outside your association's boundary. Step off, now. Cheryl spluttered. The landscape crew didn't wait. They loaded their saws in their truck and were gone before Yates finished his second sentence. Cheryl stomped back to her Lexus, mouth pinched, neck blotchy red. Greg trailed her, mumbling apologies into his collar. Yates stayed. He took photos of the downed aspens with his department phone. He took my statement. He pulled a parcel map from his cruiser laptop and showed me, line by line, where Cedar Ridge ended and Holloway property began. The HOA boundary was clear as a chalk line. He paused before driving away. Mr. Holloway, I'd recommend you talk to Marion Whitfield in Hamilton. She handles property cases. She doesn't lose. After Yates drove off, I sat in the meadow until the sun fell behind the western ridge. The downed aspens still smelled of sap and wet bark, sharp as a fresh wound. I touched the stumps. I touched the granite stone. I picked up a handful of bark fragments and dropped them into my coat pocket. I didn't know why. Just that I needed to keep something of those 2 trees, something I could close my fingers around in the long winter to come. That night, I sat on my porch staring at the gap in the aspen line. 2 trees out of 12. Years 2 and 3 of our marriage. The year Eliza taught me to bake sourdough. The year we hiked the Beartooths with packs that were too heavy and laughed about it for 1,000 miles. Gone. I cried for the first time since the funeral. I let myself cry until the moon cleared the ridge. Then I dried my face on my sleeve and made 3 phone calls. The first was to Marion Whitfield. She answered on the second ring even though it was nearly 9. I gave her the short version. She said, "Bring the deed, the patent, the survey maps, and that case file you mentioned, tomorrow at 10. And Mr. Holloway, don't say one more word to that woman without me." The second was to Pete the mailman. I asked him to keep noticing things. He said he already was. The third was to a guy I hadn't spoken to in 15 years, Tom Whitaker, a retired mineral rights specialist at the Bureau of Land Management. I told him I wanted to confirm something about my grandfather's 1962 deed transfer. He whistled when he heard the parcel number. "That Wade," he said, "you might want to sit down for this." I sat down. He told me my family didn't just own the surface of Pine Hollow Valley. We owned the subsurface rights, the water rights, and, through a fluke of the 1962 split, the access easement under Cedar Ridge Estates' only road in or out. I held the phone for a long moment, listening to the creek run cold over stones outside my window. Then I thanked Tom and hung up. A slow, quiet smile crossed my face. Cheryl Brennan didn't just want my land. She lived on mine. I kept the easement secret close to my chest. Marion agreed. "Don't tip the hand yet. We needed evidence first." For 3 weeks, Cheryl went quiet. Too quiet. Marion had sent her a polite but devastating cease and desist letter, citing the trespass, the destroyed aspens, the false enforcement orders, and the drone incident. We named a settlement number, $40,000 and a public retraction. Cheryl didn't reply. What she did instead was poisonous. She started a whisper campaign in the Cedar Ridge clubhouse. Wade Holloway was running an unpermitted Airbnb. Wade Holloway was clear-cutting protected forest. Wade Holloway was a dangerous loner. Her words, lifted from a next-door post that Pete the mailman forwarded with a grimace. She told her HOA membership I had threatened her physically. She told the local Methodist church I was a danger to children who walked the creek trail. Then she went after my livelihood. I'd been doing occasional contract surveying for landowners along the Bitter Route. Small jobs, boundary checks, neighborly stuff. Cheryl filed an anonymous complaint with the Montana Licensing Board, claiming I was practicing without insurance. The board paused my contract privileges pending investigation. The investigation cleared me in 12 days, but in those 12 days, 3 jobs evaporated. A fourth client, a sweet widow named Anne, called me sobbing, saying she'd heard from someone at Cedar Ridge that I'd tried to swindle the survey on her late husband's parcel. I drove out to Anne's place. I sat in her kitchen, showed her the email chain, showed her the licensing board's clean letter. She apologized for an hour. I told her there was nothing to apologize for and refused to charge her for the corrected boundary report. The Methodist Church incident hit hardest. Pastor Curtis Lowell, a kind, soft-spoken man in his 60s who had buried my father a decade earlier, called me on a Wednesday morning. He'd received a typed letter, unsigned but unmistakably Cheryl's voice, claiming I had lurked near the children's hike along the creek trail. He wasn't accusing me of anything. He just wanted me to know. "Wade," he said, "I told the board to throw the letter in the trash, but you should know it exists." I thanked him. I asked him to keep the letter. He said he already had. He'd photocopied it and stuck the original in the church safe. "Wade, in 50 years of ministry," he said, "I have never met a woman so committed to her own importance." I hung up the phone and stood at the window for a long time, watching the wind move across the meadow. I was no longer angry. I was past angry. I was patient. Marion and I built the file in silence. Every flyer Cheryl distributed, every email she sent, every fabricated complaint, we logged it. We sent records requests to the sheriff's office, to the county code enforcement office, to the FAA, to the state licensing board. Caleb Yates, off duty, called me one Friday night. "Mr. Holloway, you didn't hear this from me, but Cheryl came in this week trying to get Sheriff Tate to issue a county demolition order against your cabin. She told him your structure was, quote, unsafe and on disputed land." I went still. What did Sheriff Tate say? He told her to bring a court order, but sir, Sheriff Tate is up for re-election in November. Cedar Ridge donated to his campaign. I'd watch him. I will. A quick takeaway, friends. When a public servant accepts campaign money from someone with a personal grudge against you, you don't argue with them. You document everything, you file public records requests, and you keep your circle small. I started carrying a body-worn audio recorder everywhere, legal in Montana under one-party consent. I started a second case file. I called a friend at the Hamilton Raleigh Republic newspaper and asked if she'd be open to a sit-down off the record. Her name was Hannah Ellsworth. She covered county politics. She said yes. Cheryl, meanwhile, was inflating. Her Cedar Ridge buddies threw her a Defender of Property Value's backyard party. She gave a champagne toast. Greg posted a photo on Facebook. I saved it. Then the line snapped. On a still Tuesday morning, June 18th, I drove down to Hamilton to pick up groceries and meet Marion for coffee. When I rolled back up the valley road 2 hours later, I saw the dust plume first, a fat brown cloud climbing over the spruce ridge. Then I heard the diesel. A backhoe, an excavator, and a flatbed dump truck were grinding up my driveway. Cheryl Brennan stood on my front step with a Forge County demolition order in her hand and a smile like a Wolverine's. She'd decided not to wait for a court. She'd decided to take my cabin down herself. I parked behind the chaos. That's where the story you saw at the start began. "Get that filthy shack down now!" Cheryl shrieked again, waving the clipboard. The backhoe operator, a man I'd never seen, looked from her to me, then back to her, his jaw working. I pulled the 1887 land patent from my coat pocket and held it up so the operator could see it. "I am the owner of every acre under your machine. If your blade touches one log of that cabin, you are liable for criminal property destruction. Step down." He stepped down. His shoulders sagged in relief. Cheryl screamed at him. "I paid you for a job." He looked at her like she was a hornet. "Lady, I'm not going to prison for you." He climbed into his cab, backed the machine off my driveway, and was gone in 90 seconds. The dump truck followed. The excavator followed. Cheryl was left standing alone in the wildflower meadow, clipboard limp in her hand, mascara starting to run. I called Deputy Yates. I called Marion Whitfield. I called Hannah Ellsworth from the paper. While I waited for them, I walked through the wreckage. The cabin's porch was splintered. The wildflower bed was crushed. The front door had been pried half off its hinges. Inside, I found scattered glass from a broken window pane. And, worst of all, the front of an old cedar trunk had been smashed open. Inside that trunk, I kept Eliza's gardening journals, her wedding bouquet pressed in glass, and the quilt her grandmother had sewn for our wedding night. The quilt was on the floor, mud-streaked from someone's boot. I picked it up. I folded it slowly. Something inside me clicked into place. Cold, calm, final. Cheryl was still standing in the meadow. She'd lit a cigarette with shaking hands. You have no idea. What powerful people. I turned to her with the quilt in my arms. Cheryl, do you know who owns the road into Cedar Ridge? She blinked. It's a county road. No, it's a private easement. The original easement was sold in 1962 with conditions. One of those conditions is that the easement holder, me, can revoke the easement if any user of it commits a felony against the easement grantor's family. Her face went white. What you just did is a felony, multiple felonies actually. Forgery, conspiracy, destruction of property, trespass, filing a false county document. I held up the quilt. And what was in this trunk meant more to me than any acre of dirt in your subdivision. You demolished my wife's memory. I felt the weight of every loss I'd ever carried pull tight in my chest. But my voice stayed level. Hey, Cheryl, you don't live in a Cedar Ridge Estates. You live on my access easement, and as of right now, I'm revoking it. Sirens crested the ridge. Deputy Yates's cruiser, Hannah Ellsworth's hatchback behind it, Marion Whitfield's Subaru behind Hannah. Cheryl dropped the cigarette into the wildflower bed. I stepped on it for her. The next 96 hours moved like clockwork because we'd built the gears months ago. Marion Whitfield set up a war room at her Hamilton office. A converted craftsman bungalow with hardwood floors that creaked like old promises. She pinned 3 maps to the wall. The 1887 patent, the 1962 split survey, the current Ravalli County parcel overlay. On a 4th board, she pinned every piece of harassment evidence we had. Flyers, emails, photos, complaint records, body cam dispatch logs. Wade, she said, tapping the 1962 survey. This clause is the kill shot. Section 4, paragraph 2. The access easement can be revoked for cause by the grantor or his lineal heirs upon written notice to the easement users. Cheryl Brennan committed felony destruction. That's cause. A practical note for anyone listening. If you ever sell off a piece of family land, write your conditions into the deed. A handshake won't save your grandchildren. A clause will. We filed 3 things in parallel. First, a civil complaint against Cheryl Brennan personally, against Cedar Ridge Estates HOA, and against the unnamed contractor she'd hired. Damages, the destroyed aspens, the destroyed cabin porch, Eliza's quilt and trunk, emotional distress, and a punitive multiplier. Total demand, $940,000. Second, a formal written easement revocation notice, served by certified mail to all 26 Cedar Ridge homeowners. 30 days to vacate or negotiate a new easement directly with me, at fair market rate, on my terms. Third, a criminal referral to the Ravalli County Attorney's Office. Forgery of a county document is a felony in Montana. Filing a false demolition order is a felony in Montana. Conspiracy is a felony. We had Cheryl's signature, Cheryl's clipboard, and the demolition crew's testimony. Caleb Yates, the deputy, came by my cabin one evening on his own time. He sat on the broken porch step, hat in his lap. Mr. Holloway, Sheriff Tate is going to slow walk the criminal referral. He took $8,000 in campaign donations from Cedar Ridge homeowners last cycle. I can't prove a quid pro quo, but I know the man. What do you suggest? He hesitated. There's a body cam from the morning of the demolition. Mine. I responded to the call right after you did. Sheriff Tate has it on his desk. He hasn't released it because Cheryl's lawyer asked for time. If you file a public records request through the county clerk, Eleanor Pruitt, she's good people, Tate can't bury it forever. I nodded. I'll file Monday. He looked up at me. Sir, if Tate retaliates against me for this conversation, will you stand up for me? Caleb, I said, I'll stand up for you whether you ask me to or not. He shook my hand and drove away. Hannah Ellsworth, the reporter, came up Wednesday with a notepad and a small recorder. She walked the wreckage of the porch. She looked at the gap in the aspens. She listened to my whole story, start to finish, for 97 minutes, without interrupting once. Then she said, Wade, I want to write this, the full story, front page if my editor lets me. Will you let me run quotes on the record? Yes, just wait until Marion gives the green light. Done. The county clerk's office occupied a low brick building on Main Street, 3 doors down from the diner. Eleanor Pruitt, 68, white-haired, was the institutional memory of Ravalli County. She'd worked that desk since the Reagan administration. I brought my public records request typed on Marion's letterhead. Eleanor read it once, looked up at me over her reading glasses and said, "Wade Holloway, I knew your father. I knew your grandfather. And I have been waiting 40 years for someone to actually use that 1962 clause." Oh, she accepted my request. She processed it the same morning. She handed me Caleb Yates's body cam footage on a labeled thumb drive by lunchtime. She also handed me, unprompted, a printout of every public records request Sheriff Tate's office had blocked or delayed in the last 18 months. A stack 2 inches thick. "If you need a witness," she said, "I'm available. And I never forget a sheriff who buries paperwork." I called Tom Whitaker at the BLM and asked him to put the mineral rights and water rights filings into my hands officially. Within 5 business days, I had 3 certified documents, raised seal, county clerk stamp. 1, surface ownership of all 4,200 acres of Pine Hollow Valley. 2, subsurface mineral rights, including a small but functional gold seam vein on the South Ridge. 3, exclusive water rights to the creek that fed Cedar Ridge's irrigation pumps. The takeaway here, friends, water rights in the American West are older than most state laws. Whoever holds them holds power that survives elections, lawsuits, and HOA presidents. I framed all 3 documents. I hung them above the kitchen table. Eliza's wildflower meadow stretched out beyond the window, scarred but breathing. The county commissioner's open meeting was scheduled for June 30th. Public comment was on the agenda. Marion filed our notice of attendance. I sharpened a pencil and laid out a clean shirt. Cheryl didn't go quiet after the revocation notice. She went rabid. She convened an emergency Cedar Ridge HOA meeting and told her 26 homeowner families that the access road was absolutely safe and that I was bluffing about the easement. She told them not to negotiate with me, not to talk to my attorney, not to attend the county commissioners meeting. She told them the lawsuit would be dismissed within a week. Half of them believed her. The other half started knocking on my door. The first was a man named Daniel Foster, a soft-spoken pediatric dentist from Spokane who'd retired to Cedar Ridge with his wife Sarah 3 years earlier. He showed up on a Sunday morning with a peach pie and an apology. "Mr. Holloway, my wife and I had no idea what Cheryl was doing. We thought she was just enthusiastic." He set the pie on my porch. "We don't agree with any of this. Whatever you need from us, you have it." The second was an older couple, the Ellisons. He'd been a Forest Service hydrologist. She'd been a librarian. They brought a thick folder of every Cedar Ridge email Cheryl had ever sent. 40 months worth, sorted by date. "We've been keeping records too," Mr. Ellison said quietly. We didn't trust her from week 1. The third was Mrs. Lindstrom, a retired family physician, 81 and steady as a metronome. She drove up Tuesday afternoon with a hot dish of shepherd's pie wrapped in a towel. She apologized for Cheryl in a careful, deliberate voice. "Mr. Holloway, I have lived through 3 small towns and 2 HOA boards. Cheryl is not unusual. She is only ordinary. What is unusual is your patience." She set the dish on my kitchen table. "Eat. Grief is hungry work." I ate. She stayed for an hour and told me about her late husband, a cardiologist who'd built their retirement home at Cedar Ridge specifically for the mountain air. "He would have stood with you," she said, "and so do I." And I made coffee and we sat on the porch. I told them my plans. They told me they were in. By Wednesday, 11 of the 26 Cedar Ridge families had broken with Cheryl. They organized a side meeting in the Ellisons' living room and elected an interim spokesperson, Daniel Foster, to negotiate a new easement with me directly. Marion welcomed them. The new agreement we drafted protected the road, protected my family land, and stripped Cheryl Brennan of all HOA enforcement authority going forward. Cheryl found out about the splinter meeting within hours. Her response was operatic. She filed 3 more bogus complaints with the Montana Licensing Board. They were dismissed within 36 hours. Marion had already alerted the board's chief counsel. She tried to get Sheriff Tate to issue a restraining order against me on grounds of intimidation. Tate, sweating now, declined. So Cheryl moved to her last lever. Sheriff Wallace Tate, 10 years on the job, drove up my driveway alone on a Thursday afternoon. He stepped out of his cruiser with his hand resting too casually on his belt. He was a barrel-chested man, 58, with a neck like a fence post and eyes that didn't quite meet mine. "And Wade, mind if we talk?" On the porch, Sheriff, hands where I can see them. He frowned. That's not necessary. It is for me. I gestured to a chair. He sat. I sat across from him. My body-worn recorder was on, and I told him so. He squinted. All right, look, this Brennan situation, it's getting big. It's bad for the county. It's bad for the election cycle. I've talked to the county attorney. We can offer Mrs. Brennan a misdemeanor plea, disturbing the peace, $100 fine. You drop the civil suit, the criminal referral, the easement revocation. Everyone walks. We move on. I let the silence sit for a long 10 seconds. Hey, Sheriff, you took $8,000 from her homeowner's donations last cycle. Are you aware that's documented? His eyes flickered. That's not... And you've been sitting on Deputy Yates's body cam footage for 14 days. The county clerk released it this morning under public records law. Hannah Ellsworth has a copy. The video clearly shows Cheryl Brennan ordering destruction of my property with a forged document. Sheriff Tate said nothing. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Sheriff Tate, I want you to leave my porch. I want you to think very carefully about what's on Caleb Yates's body cam. And I want you to remember that the county commissioners meeting is on Monday. Whatever you do between now and then is going to define the rest of your career. He stood. He walked to his cruiser. He drove away slowly. I exhaled. The valley was very quiet. A red-tailed hawk circled once over the meadow and dropped behind the western ridge. Somewhere down by the creek, a grouse drummed in the alders. I sat on the porch a long time before I went inside, listening to the place I came home to. The place a stranger had tried to take from me. The place that was still here, still mine, still breathing. Cheryl made one last desperate move on Sunday, the day before the commissioners' meeting. She tried to flip the narrative on social media. She posted a long, weepy Facebook video, soft lighting, blonde curls fluffed, mascara already runny, in which she claimed she was the victim of a vicious campaign of harassment by a dangerous backwoods man who was trying to seize valuable land from hardworking families. She cried on camera. She claimed she'd been physically threatened in my own community. She held up a printed photo of her clipboard like a war wound. She asked her followers to call the county commissioners and demand protection for Cedar Ridge. Within 45 minutes, the video had 19,000 views. Within 90 minutes, Hannah Ellsworth published her front page Hamilton Rivali Republic expose online. Cheryl's emails, the forged demolition order, the body cam stills, the destroyed aspens, the quilt on the muddy floor, Caleb Yates's quotes, the $8,000 in campaign donations, Cheryl's whisper campaign against me, the whole rotten timeline. Within 3 hours, Cheryl's Facebook video was at 58,000 views, and the comments had turned. People were finding the article, screenshots were spreading, hashtags I won't repeat were trending across western Montana. Cheryl took the video down by sundown. The internet, being what it is, had already saved it. Greg Brennan called my cabin at 10:30 that night. Wade, this is Greg. I want to talk to you, off the record. There's no off the record, Greg. Marion Whitfield is my counsel. I won't speak to you without her present. A long pause. Then, Cheryl's losing her mind. She's drinking. She's calling people at midnight. I've never seen her like this. Greg, your wife committed a felony against my family. There is no path here that doesn't involve consequences for her. The best thing you can do is encourage her to plead truthfully tomorrow. I just want you to know I tried to stop her. About the aspens, about the cabin. She wouldn't listen. Then write that in an affidavit and bring it to Marion tomorrow morning. He hung up. To his quiet credit, he showed up at Marion's office at 7:30 Monday morning with a signed, notarized statement detailing every escalation Cheryl had pushed past his protests. Greg Brennan, in the end, chose honesty. I don't know what their marriage looked like after that, but he made the right call. That same Monday morning, the Raleigh County Attorney's Office, facing front-page coverage, viral pressure, and a watertight evidence file, formally charged Cheryl Brennan with 3 counts of felony forgery, 1 count of conspiracy, 1 count of destruction of property over $35,000, and 1 count of filing a false governmental record. Bail was set at $25,000. She posted it by noon. Sheriff Wallace Tate, in a move that surprised no one and disappointed everyone, called a press conference at 11 and announced he was voluntarily transferring oversight of the Brennan case to the Montana Attorney General's office to ensure full transparency. Caleb Yates, standing behind him at the podium, kept his eyes on the floor. 2 reporters later told me Tate had spent 30 minutes that morning trying to get Yates to soften his testimony. Yates refused. A quick lesson worth banking, friends. The most powerful weapon a small-town honest cop has is a body cam he refuses to forget. Trust the deputy who keeps records. Distrust the sheriff who buries them. By 2 in the afternoon, Cheryl Brennan was suspended as president of Cedar Ridge Estates by an emergency vote of the homeowners, 18-8, with Greg abstaining. Daniel Foster was named acting president. He drove up to my cabin within the hour, parked his Subaru, walked to my porch, and shook my hand. "Wade," he said, "whatever the commissioners decide tomorrow, Cedar Ridge will respect it. We're done being run by a tyrant." I nodded. I poured him coffee. The aspen gap in the meadow was still raw and pale, but a thin green sucker had sprouted from one of the cut stumps that very morning. Eliza had taught me that aspens never really die. They share roots underground and rise again from each other. I hoped that was true of communities too. Tomorrow we would find out. The Ravalli County Commissioner's Chambers had been built in 1934. High ceilings, brass railings, oak benches polished slick by 90 years of public business. By 6:55 the Monday evening, every bench was full, standing room only. KECI-TV was there. The Hamilton Ravalli Republic was there. 2 stringers from Missoula and a freelance photographer from Bozeman were squeezed against the back wall. I walked in with Marion Whitfield on my left and Caleb Yates, in uniform, but off shift, on my right. The Ellisons, Daniel Foster, and 10 other Cedar Ridge homeowners filled the second row. Pete the mailman sat in the back, hat in his lap. Hannah Ellsworth had a press seat in the front, recorder out. Cheryl Brennan sat alone in the third row. Greg sat 1 row behind her, not beside her. Her blonde bob was lacquered hard, her makeup armor thick, but her hands shook on her clipboard. Chairman Roy Vandermark called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. Public comment opened at 7:03. I walked to the podium. I had 3 minutes. I'd written my remarks at the kitchen table the night before, edited them twice, and laid them next to Eliza's wedding ring before I left. Chairman Vandermark, commissioners, friends, neighbors. My name is Wade Holloway. My family settled Pine Hollow Valley in 1887. 3 weeks ago, the president of Cedar Ridge Estates Homeowners Association brought a backhoe up my driveway with a Forge County document and ordered the demolition of my home. The home she ordered destroyed was a cabin my great-grandfather built and that I had restored as a memorial to my late wife Eliza, who died of cancer in 2023. I let the silence hold. I am here tonight to formally enter into the public record the following facts. I read them in order: the 1887 patent, the 1962 deed with the access easement revocation clause, the 4,200-acre boundary, the water rights, the mineral rights, the destruction of the aspens, the Forge demolition order, the 8,000 in donations from Cedar Ridge homeowners to the sheriff's election campaign, the dismissed licensing board complaints, the whisper campaign against my widow client Anne, the body cam footage, now publicly available. I held up Eliza's quilt, still folded. This was in the cedar trunk Cheryl Brennan ordered cut open. My wife's grandmother sewed this in 1949. It is irreplaceable. So was my wife. I set the quilt back down. As of June 19th, I formally revoked the access easement that allows Cedar Ridge Estates to use my road. I have since negotiated a new easement with 11 homeowner families who chose honesty over fear. That new easement preserves their road access in perpetuity. The remaining homeowners are welcome to join that agreement on the same terms. No one's home will be threatened by my hand. I paused, looking at Cheryl directly for the first time. Cheryl Brennan, on the other hand, will face the courts. Then I turned back to the commissioners. I am asking this body for one thing tonight. I am asking you to formally censure the Ravalli County Sheriff's Department for sitting on body cam footage that should have been released in 72 hours. I am asking you to support Deputy Caleb Yates, who did his job correctly when others didn't. And I am announcing that, pending final county zoning approval, I am donating 3,800 acres of Pine Hollow Valley to the state of Montana's Public Land Trust, to be preserved in perpetuity as the Eliza Holloway Conservation Reserve, open to every child in this county, free of charge, forever. The chamber went still. Then Pete the mailman started clapping, then the Ellisons. then Daniel Foster, then the back wall, then the second row. Within 10 seconds, the entire room was on its feet. Applause, whistles, one elderly rancher shouting, "Damn right!" so loud the chairman didn't even gavel it down. Cheryl Brennan didn't stand. Cheryl Brennan didn't move. She just stared at her clipboard like it had betrayed her. I stepped down from the podium. Marion squeezed my elbow. Caleb Yates wiped his eye with the back of his hand and pretended he hadn't. Chairman Vandermark waited for the room to settle. He cleared his throat twice. Then he leaned into the microphone and said, "Mr. Holloway, this body accepts your record into the public minutes." He turned to the commissioner beside him. "And I move that we open a formal review of the Sheriff's Department's records release practices, effective immediately." The motion seconded in 3 seconds. It passed unanimously in 4. Cheryl Brennan stood up suddenly, swaying. Her clipboard slipped from her hand and hit the oak floor with a flat, hollow sound. She tried to speak. The words came out as a kind of clicking in her throat. Greg, 2 rows back, did not look at her. She gathered her clipboard, gathered her purse, gathered what was left of her bearing, and walked down the aisle alone. Half the room turned away from her as she passed. The other half didn't bother. Outside, the Montana sky was the color of clean copper. The valley was waiting. The civil case settled 6 weeks later. Cheryl Brennan and her HOA insurance carrier paid out $812,000. $800 to me, $12,000 to Anne for the damage Cheryl had done to her business with me. Cheryl personally lost her home in the settlement. Cedar Ridge's 26 homes were untouched, their road easement renewed under the new agreement. The criminal case took longer. The Montana Attorney General's office secured guilty pleas on 2 felony counts. Cheryl received 18 months supervised probation, 3,000 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from holding any HOA office in the state. She and Greg divorced quietly that autumn. Greg moved to Idaho to be near his sister. Last I heard, he was running a small fishing fly shop on the Snake River and seemed, by all accounts, lighter than he'd been in years. Sheriff Wallace Tate did not seek re-election. Caleb Yates ran in his place. He won by 61% of the vote on a platform of body cams, transparency, and no campaign donations from anyone with active cases pending. He's now the youngest sheriff in Ravalli County history. He keeps a small frame photograph of the Pine Hollow aspens on his office wall. The Eliza Holloway Conservation Reserve was approved by the state in November. 3,800 acres of meadow, ridge, creek, and forest, open to the public, free forever. I kept the original 400 acres around the cabin, my grandfather's original homestead, as a working family parcel. We held the opening ceremony on what would have been Eliza's 41st birthday. 218 people came. Pete the mailman drove the shuttle van. The Ellisons brought peach cobbler. Daniel Foster's wife Sarah read a poem. We also launched the Holloway Scholarship for Rural Studies, $25,000 a year, awarded to one Ravalli County kid pursuing a degree in conservation, surveying, hydrology, or land law. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl from a single-wide trailer in Darby who taught herself to read USGS topographical maps from library books. Her name was Hattie Briggs, and she cried when I handed her the check. I cried a little too. After the ceremony, I walked Hattie up the meadow path to the granite stone in the aspen grove. I told her about Eliza. I told her the scholarship was named for the kind of woman who would have loved every inch of her, every map she'd memorized, every watershed she dreamed of charting. Hattie squatted by the stone and ran her fingers across Eliza's name. "My mom died too," she said quietly. 2 summers ago, drunk driver outside Stevensville. I didn't have anything to say to that. So we just stood there in the wind for a while. When we walked back down toward the cars, she asked me what surveying school felt like. I told her about reading transit angles by candlelight in basic training, and the first time I stood on a property corner, I'd set myself and felt the whole world reorder. She listened the way a person listens when they already know the answer is going to shape their life. The aspen grove behind my cabin is full again. 12 trees, then 13, then 14. The suckers from the cut stumps came up faster than I expected, and I let them grow. The granite stone is still there at the center, etched with Eliza's name. I sit out there most mornings with my coffee. The chickadees have come back. The meadowlarks return every May. I think about Cheryl Brennan sometimes, not with hate, that fire burned out a long time ago. I think about her with something quieter, more curious. She'd convinced herself that small power was the same as righteous power. She'd built a life around enforcing rules she made up, against people she'd decided were beneath her. And when she met a man who simply refused to be moved, her whole construct collapsed. She thought my cabin was the prize. She didn't understand that the prize had never been the cabin. The prize was the valley. The prize was my wife's memory. The prize was the community that closed in around me when she tried to break me. The prize was every honest neighbor who chose truth over fear. Every quiet deputy who chose his oath over his boss. Every reporter who chose the facts over the friend group.